Lovely Stories on the Drink. Today we are going to be reading a story, but first up we are going to be reading the Bible, then we are going to be doing the synopsis with Kimberly, then we are going to be reading Fellowship of the Ring. I hope you guys enjoy. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell, not miss another video. Here's my dad to do the Bible reading. I did not mess up today. And in the Fellowship of the Ring, we are going to be walking in Middle Earth. I hope you enjoy. Here's my dad.
15, right?
Hello. Thank you, one person, for being here. I appreciate you. So we are picking up with 1 Samuel chapter 15.
That was fast.
What?
The Lord rejects Saul as king.
Yeah. The Lord rejects Saul as king. Yeah, that was the... Actually, mine just says the Lord rejects Saul.
Same
But,
here.
whatever. The headings over the sections are not written from the scripture. Those are from the editors of the particular Bible that you're reading from. So that's why I don't read them when I'm reading the scripture. But it's very handy for finding places when you're looking for them. So, all right. So this is 1 Samuel, like I said, chapter 15. This is the English Standard Version of the Bible. And let me begin. And Samuel said to Saul, "The Lord sent me to anoint you king over his people Israel. Now therefore listen to the words of the Lord. Thus says the Lord of hosts, I have noted what Amalek did to Israel in opposing them on the way when they came up out of Egypt. Now go and strike Amalek and devote to..." Did I read that right?
Yeah.
"Devote to destruction all that they have. Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey." In other words, obliterate these dudes. So Saul summoned the people and numbered them in Telaim, 200,000 men on foot and 10,000 men of Judah. And Saul came to the city of Amalek and lay in wait in the valley. Then Saul said to the Kenites, "Depart, go down from among the Amalekites, lest I destroy you with them. For you showed kindness to all the people of Israel when they came up out of Egypt." So the Kenites departed from among the Amalekites, and Saul defeated the Amalekites from Havilah as far as Shur, which is east of Egypt. And he took Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive, and devoted to destruction all the people with the edge of the sword. But Saul and the people spared Agag and the best of the sheep and of the oxen and of the fatted calves and the lambs and all that was good, and would not utterly destroy them. All that was despised and worthless they devoted to destruction. The word of the Lord came to Samuel, "I regret that I have made Saul king, for he has turned back from following me and has not performed my commandments." And Samuel was angry, and he cried to the Lord all night. And Samuel rose early to meet Saul in the morning, and it was told Samuel, Saul came to Carmel, and behold, he set up a monument for himself, and turned and passed on, and went down to Gilgal. And Samuel came to Saul, and Saul said to him, "Blessed be you to the Lord. I have performed the commandment of the Lord." And Samuel said, "What then is this bleating of the sheep in my ears, and the lowing of the oxen that I hear?" Saul said, "They have brought them from the Amalekites, for the people spared the best of the sheep and of the oxen to sacrifice to the Lord your God, and the rest we have devoted to destruction." Then Samuel said to Saul, "Stop, I will tell you what the Lord said to me this night." And he said to him, "Speak." And Samuel said, "Though you are little in your own eyes, are you not the head of the tribes of Israel? The Lord anointed you king over Israel, and the Lord sent you on a mission and said, Go devote to destruction the sinners, the Amalekites, and fight against them until they are consumed. Why then did you not obey the voice of the Lord? Why did you pounce on the spoil and do what was evil in the sight of the Lord? And Saul said to Samuel, I have obeyed the voice of the Lord. I have gone on the mission on which the Lord sent me. I have brought Agag, the king of Amalek, and I have devoted the Amalekites to destruction. But the people took of the spoil sheep and oxen, the best of the things devoted to destruction, to sacrifice to the Lord your God in Gilgal. And Samuel said, Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifice as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to listen than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of divination, and presumption is as iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being king. Saul said to Samuel, I have sinned, for I have transgressed the commandment of the Lord and your words, because I feared the people and obeyed their voice. Now therefore, please pardon my sin, and return with me, that I may bow before the Lord. And Samuel said to Saul, I will not return with you, for you have rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord has rejected you from being king over Israel. And Samuel turned to go away. As Samuel turned to go away, Saul seized the skirt of his robe, and it tore. And Samuel said to him, The Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you this day, and has given it to a neighbor of yours who is better than you. And also the glory of Israel will not lie or have regret, for he is not a man that he should have regret. Then he said, I have sinned, yet honor me now before the elders of my people and before Israel, and return with me, that I may bow before the Lord your God. So Samuel turned back after Saul, and Saul bowed before the Lord. Then Samuel said, Bring here to me Agag, the king of the Amalekites. And Agag came to him cheerfully. Agag said, Surely the bitterness of death is past. And Samuel said, As your sword has made women childless, so shall your mother be childless among women. And Samuel hacked Agag to pieces before the Lord in Gilgal. Then Samuel went to Ramoth, and Saul went up to his house in Gibeah of Saul. And Samuel did not see Saul again until the day of his death. But Samuel grieved over Saul, and the Lord regretted that he had made Saul king over Israel. So, one thing that I would like to point out is that, so I know that a lot of times I get people that follow the rules, they do what we tell them to do, but they don't follow all of the instructions completely, and then they get frustrated because we are not pleased with their work. And so this is sort of the same thing in a way, because Saul went out, he defeated the Amalekites just like he was told, but then he didn't follow the instructions. And then when he got called out on it, this happens at home, in our home. When he got called out on it, he said, oh, well, we were saving those for sacrifices. Hey, let me make up some excuse why I didn't follow the instructions correctly. And so that happens sometimes, and it's really frustrating from my perspective. And I can see how it is frustrating from God's perspective when we act like we're following God's will, but then maybe we don't follow his instructions completely. So that's all I'm going to say about that for right now. Also, this section has a lot of really key scriptures. For example, behold, to obey is better than sacrifice is a pretty key scripture. Also, another key scripture from this chapter was, where was it? And I haven't gone through and highlighted these. I know I read it. There was another one. All right, so I'll have to find it, and I'll highlight it, and then I'll be able to find it later when I'm looking for it. Okay, so basically what happened in the last chapter was the mountain didn't like dwarves, and he wouldn't allow anybody that was around dwarves to pass through the mountain. So the mountain said very clearly to the passengers, I don't like dwarves, and I'm not going to let anybody in the company of dwarves pass by my mountain. The ring bearer and his 8 companions were trying to pass through the mountain Caradros, which is it here?
I think it'd be near Moria.
Hey, can you be quiet, please? Let me. Yes, it's not actually on the map, but the mountain. After it told them that they tried to cross past the mountain, and the mountain ate them and swallowed them, and they died. And that's the end of the story. So now Kimberly's going to come and tell how it really happened.
For real, Dad? So, what actually happened was the mountain, it didn't talk, but he was right in the mountain not liking dwarves and elves too, I think. So, they went up the mountain, and it turns out that the mountain, it decided, I'm going to give them the biggest blizzard that they've ever had. So it just had this huge blizzard. And eventually it stopped, and they started to plow through the snow to go back, because they're like, okay, I don't want to go through this blizzard sort of thing again, because we nearly froze to death. So now they basically went nowhere. They actually did go down a little bit south, but when they came up to the mountain where they were trying to cross the mountains, they didn't go anywhere. They just, it actually would have been more productive if they sat around and did nothing. Well, sat around and got some food, I guess, would be productive. I'm going to hand it off to Dad, who is going to do a really good job reading the book to us.
Yes, because I do a better job of reading than I do of recalling. So, obviously, I can't remember what happened in the last chapter, but Kimberly does a much better job. That's why we each have our strengths. JJ's very good at introducing. Kimberly's very good at recalling and synopsisizing. And Daniel's good at telling jokes. What? I said it. It! All right, we're done. All right, so now we're going to read half of chapter 4. I already looked at it. I found a place to quit for the day so that we don't have to read for an hour and a half. And let me begin. This is chapter 4, A Journey in the Dark. It was evening, and the gray light was again waning fast, and they halted for the night. They were very weary. The mountains were veiled in deepening dusk, and the wind was cold. Gandalf spared them one more mouthful each of the Miravor of Rivendell. When they had eaten some food, he called a council. "We cannot, of course, go on again tonight," he said. "The attack on the Redhorn Gate has tired us out, and we must rest here for a while." "And then where are we to go?" asked Frodo. "We will still have our journey and our errand before us," answered Gandalf. "We have no choice but to go on, or to return to Rivendell." JJ needs to settle. This is not too cool. Sorry. This pause brought to you by JJ. All right, I'm going to continue. We have no choice but to go on, or to return to Rivendell. Pippin's face brightened visibly at the mere mention of return to Rivendell. Merry and Sam, which I don't think Gandalf really had on the table. I think he was just saying, hey, listen, if we don't go on, then we need to go back. But we're going to go on. Merry and Sam looked up hopefully, but Aragorn and Boromir made no sign. Frodo looked troubled. I wish I was back there, he said, but how can I return without shame, unless there is indeed no other way, and we have already been defeated. We are already defeated. You are right, Frodo, said Gandalf. To go back is to admit defeat, and face worse defeat to come. If we go back now, then the ring must remain there. We shall not be able to set out again. Then, sooner or later, Rivendell will be besieged, and after a brief and bitter time, it will be destroyed. The Ringwraiths are deadly enemies, but they are only shadows yet of the power and terror they would possess if the ruling ring was on their master's hand again. Then we must go on, if there is a way, said Frodo with a sigh. Sam sank back into gloom. There is a way that we may attempt, said Gandalf. I thought from the beginning, when I first considered this journey, that we should try it, but it is not a pleasant way, and I have not spoken of it to the company before. Aragorn was against it until the pass over the mountains had at least been tried. If it is worse road than the Redhorn Gate, then it must be evil indeed, said Merry. But you had better tell us about it, and let us know the worst at once. The road that I speak of leads to the mines of Moria, said Gandalf. Only Gimli lifted his head. A smouldering fire was in his eyes. On all the others a dread fell at the mention of that name. Even to the hobbits it was a legend of vague fear. The road may lead to Moria, but how can we hope that it will lead through Moria? Said Aragorn darkly. It is a name of ill omen, said Boromir, nor do I see the need to go there. If we cannot cross the mountains, let us journey southward until we come to the Gap of Rohan, where men are friendly to my people, taking the road that I followed on my way hither. Or we may pass by and cross the Isen into Langstrand and Lebanon, and so come to Gondor from the regions nigh to the sea. Things have changed since you came north, Boromir, answered Gandalf. Did you not hear what I told you of Saruman? With him I have my business of my own ere all is over. With him I may have business of my own ere all is over. But the ring must not come near Isengard, if that can by any means be prevented. The Gap of Rohan is closed to us, while we go with the bearer. As for the longer road, we cannot afford the time. We might spend a year in such a journey, and we should pass through many lands that are empty and harbourless, yet they would not be safe. The watchful eyes of both Saruman and of the enemy are on them. When you came north, Boromir, you were in the enemy's eyes, only one stray wanderer from the south, and the matter of small concern to him. His mind was busy with the pursuit of the ring, but you return now as a member of the ring's company, and you are in peril as long as you remain with us. The danger will increase with every league that we go on south under the naked sky. Since our open attempt on the mountain pass, our plight has become more desperate, I fear. I see now little hope if we do not soon vanish from sight for a while and cover our trail. Therefore, I advise that we should go neither over the mountains nor around them, but under them. That is a road, at any rate, that the enemy will least expect us to take. We do not know what he expects, said Boromir. He may watch all roads, likely and unlikely. In that case, to enter Moria would be to walk into a trap, hardly better than knocking at the gates of the Dark Tower itself. The name of Moria is black, You speak of what you do not know, like when you liken Moria to the stronghold of Sauron, answered Gandalf. I alone of you have ever been in the dungeons of the Dark Lord, and only in his older and lesser dwelling in Dol Guldur. Those who pass the gates of Barad-dûr do not return. But I would not lead you into Moria if there were no hope of coming out again. If there are orcs there, it may prove ill for us, that is true. But most of the orcs of the Misty Mountains were scattered or destroyed in the Battle of 5 Armies. The eagles report that orcs are gathering again from afar, but there is hope that Moria is still free. There is even a chance that dwarves are there, and that in some deep hall of his father's, Balin, son of Fundin, may be found. However, it may prove one must tread the path that need chooses. I will tread the path with you, Gandalf, said Gimli. I will go back and look on the halls of Durin, whatever may wait there, if you can find the doors that are shut. Good, Gimli, said Gandalf. You encourage me. Excuse me. We will seek the hidden doors together, and we will come through. In the ruins of the dwarves, a dwarf's head will be less easy to bewilder than elves or men or hobbits. Yet it will not be the first time that I have been to Moria. I sought there long for Thrain, son of Thror, after he was lost. I passed through and came out again alive. I too once passed through Dimriel Gate, said Aragorn quietly, but though I also came out again, the memory is very evil. I do not wish to enter Moria a second time. And I do not wish to enter even once, said Pippin. Nor me, muttered Sam. Of course not, said Gandalf. Who would? But the question is, who will follow me if I lead you there? I will, said Gimli eagerly. I will, said Aragorn heavily. You followed my lead almost to disaster in the snow, and have said no word of blame. I will follow your lead now, if this last warning does not move you. It is not of the ring, nor of us others that I am thinking now, but of you, Gandalf. And I say to you, if you pass the doors of Moria, beware. I will not go, said Boromir, not unless the voice of the whole company is against me. What do Legolas and the little folk say? The ring-bearer's voice surely should be heard. I do not wish to go to Moria, said Legolas. The hobbits said nothing. Sam looked at Frodo. At last Frodo spoke. I do not wish to go, he said, but neither do I wish to refuse the advice of Gandalf. I beg that there should be no vote until we have slept on it. Gandalf will get votes easier in the light of the morning than in this cold gloom. How the wind howls. At these words all fell into silent thought. They heard the wind hissing among the rocks and the trees, and there was a howling and a wailing round them in the empty spaces of the night. Suddenly Aragorn leapt to his feet. How the wind howls, he cried. It is howling with wolf voices. The wargs have come west of the mountains. Need we wait until morning then? Said Gandalf. It is as I said, the hunt is up. Even if we live to see the dawn, who now will wish to journey south by night with the wild wolves on his trail? How far is Moria? Asked Boromir. There was a door southwest of Caradhras, some 15 miles as the crow flies, and maybe 20 as the wolf runs, answered Gandalf grimly. Then let us start as soon as it is light tomorrow, if we can, said Boromir. The wolf that one hears is worse than the orc that one fears. True, said Aragorn, loosening his sword in its sheath. But where the warg howls, there also the orc prowls. I wish I'd taken Elrond's advice, muttered Pippin to Sam. I am no good after all. There is not enough of the breed of Bandobras, the bull-roarer, in me. These howls freeze my blood. I don't ever remember feeling so wretched." "My heart's right down in my toes, Mr. Pippin," said Sam, "but we aren't eaten yet. We aren't eaten yet." It's spelled E-T-T-E-N, etten. "And there are some stout folk here with us. Whatever may be in store for old Gandalf, I'll wager it isn't a wolf's belly." For their defense in the night, the company climbed to the top of the small hill under which they had been sheltering. It was crowned with a knot of old and twisted trees, about which lay a broken circle of boulder stones. In the midst of this they lit a fire, for there was no hope that darkness and silence would keep their trail from discovery by the hunting packs. Round the fire they sat, and those that were not on guard dozed uneasily. Poor Bill the pony trembled and sweated where he stood. The howling of the wolves was now all round them, sometimes nearer and sometimes further off. In the dead of night many shining eyes were seen peering over the brow of the hill. Some advanced almost to the ring of stones. At a gap in the circle a great dark wolf shape could be seen halted, gazing at them. A shouldering howl broke from him as if he were a captain summoning his pack to the assault. Gandalf stood up and strode forward, holding his staff aloft. "Listen, hound of Sauron," he cried. "Gandalf is here! Fly, if you value your foul skin. I will shrivel you from tail to snout if you come within this ring." The wolf snarled and sprang toward them with a great leap. At that moment there was a sharp twang. Legolas had loosed his bow. There was a hideous yell, and the leaping shape thudded to the ground. The elvish arrow had pierced its throat. The watching eyes were suddenly extinguished. Gandalf and Aragorn strode forward, but the hill was deserted. The hunting packs had fled. All about them the darkness grew silent, and no cry came on the sighing wind. The night was old, and westward the waning moon was setting, gleaming fitfully through the breaking clouds. Suddenly Frodo started from sleep. Without warning, a storm of howls broke out fierce and wild all about the camp. A great host of wargs had gathered silently, and was now attacking them from every side at once. "Fling fuel on the fire!" cried Gandalf to the hobbits. "Draw your blades and stand back to back!" In the leaping light, as the fresh wood blazed up, Frodo saw many grey shapes spring over the ring of stones. More and more followed. Through the throat of one huge leader, Aragorn passed his sword with a thrust. With a great sweep, Boromir hewed the head off another. Beside them, Gimli stood with his stout legs apart, wielding his dwarf axe. The bow of Legolas was singing. In the wavering firelight, Gandalf seemed suddenly to grow. He rose up, a great menacing shape like the monument of some ancient king of stone set upon a hill. Stooping like a cloud, he lifted a burning branch and strode to meet the wolves. They gave back before him. High in the air he tossed the blazing brand. It flared with a sudden white radiance like lightning, and his voice rolled like thunder. "Nor an edreth amen, nor dan I narhoth," he cried. There was a roar and a crackle, and the tree above him burst into a leaf and bloom of blinding flame. The fire leapt from treetop to treetop. The whole hill was crowned with dazzling light. The swords and knives of the defenders shone and flickered. The last arrow of Legolas kindled in the air as it flew and plunged, burning, into the heart of a great wolf chieftain. All the others fled. Soon the fire died till nothing was left but falling ash and sparks. A bitter smoke curled above the burning tree stumps and blew darkly from the hill as the first light of dawn came dimly in the sky. Their enemies were routed and did not return. "What did I tell you, Mr. Pippin?" said Sam, sheathing his sword. "Wolves won't get him. That was an eye-opener, and no mistake. Nearly singed the hair off my head." When the full light of the morning came no signs when the full light of the morning came, no signs of the wolves were to be found, and they looked in vain for the bodies of the dead. No trace of the fight remained but the charred trees and the arrows of Legolas lying on the hilltop. All were undamaged save one, which only the point was left. "It is as I feared," said Gandalf. "Those were no ordinary wolves hunting for food in the wilderness. Let us eat quickly and go." That day the weather changed again, almost as if it was at the command of some power that had no longer any use for snow since they had retreated from the pass, a power that wished now to have a clear light in which things that moved in the wild could be seen from far away. The wind had been turning through north to northwest during the night, and now it failed. The clouds vanished southwards, and the sky was opened high and blue, and they stood upon the hillside ready to depart. A pale sunlight gleamed over the mountain tops. "We must reach the doors before sunset," said Gandalf, "or I fear we shall not reach them at all. It is not far, but our path may be winding, for here Aragorn cannot guide us. He has seldom walked in this country, and only once have I been under the west wall of Moria, and that was long ago." "There it lies," he cried, pointing away southeastward to where the mountain's sides fell sheer into the shadows at their feet. In the distance could be dimly seen a line of bare cliffs, and in their midst, taller than the rest, one great grey wall. "When we left the pass, I led you southwards, and not back to our starting point, as some of you may have noticed. It is well that I did so, for now we have several miles less to cross, and haste is needed. Let us go." I do not know which to hope," said Boromir grimly, "that Gandalf will find what he seeks, or that coming to the cliff we shall find the gates lost forever. All choices seem ill, and to be caught between wolves and the wall, the likeliest chance. Lead on." Gimli now walked ahead of the wizard's side, so eager was he to come to Moria. Together they led the company back toward the mountains. The only road of old to Moria from the west had lain along the course of a stream, the Sirinon, that ran out from the feet of the cliffs near where the doors had stood. But either Gandalf was astray, or else the land had changed in recent years, for he did not strike the stream where he looked to find it, only a few miles southward from their start. The morning was passing toward noon, and still the company wandered and scrambled in a barren country of red stones. Nowhere could they see any gleam of water or hear any sound of it. All was bleak and dry. Their hearts sank. They saw no living thing, and not a bird was in the sky. But what the night would bring, if it caught them in that lost land, none of them cared to think. Suddenly Gimli, who had pressed on ahead, called back to them. He was standing on a knoll and pointing to the right. Hurrying up, they saw below them a deep and narrow channel. It was empty and silent, and hardly a trickle of water flowed among the brown and red-stained stones of its bed, and on the near side there was a path, much broken and decayed, that wound its way among the ruined walls and paving stones of an ancient high road. "Ah, here it is at last," said Gandalf. "This is where the stream ran, Sirinon, the Gate Stream they used to call it. But what has happened to the water I cannot guess. It used to be swift and noisy. Come, we must hurry on, we are late." The company were footsore and tired, but they trudged doggedly along the rough and winding track for many miles. The sun turned from noon and began to go west. After a brief halt and a hasty meal, they went on again. Before them the mountains frowned, but their path lay in a deep trough of land, and they could see only the higher shoulders and the far eastward peaks. At length they came to a sharp bend. There the road, which had been veering southwards between the brink of a channel and the steep fall of the land to the left, turned and went due east again. Rounding the corner, they saw before them a low cliff some 5 fathoms high, with a broken and jagged top. Over it a trickling water dripped through a wide cleft that seemed to have been carved out by a fall that had once been strong and full. "Indeed, things have changed," said Gandalf, "but there is no mistaking the place. There is all that remains of the stair falls. If I remember right, there was a flight of steps cut in the rock at their side, but the main road wound away left and climbed with several loops up to the level ground at the top. There used to be a shallow valley beyond the falls right up to the walls of Moria, and the Cyrano flowed through it with the road beside it. Let us go and see what things are like now." They found the stone steps without difficulty, and Gimli sprang swiftly up them, followed by Gandalf and Frodo. When they reached the top, they saw that they could go no further that way, and the reason for the drying up of the gate stream was revealed. Behind them, the sinking sun filled the cool western sky with glimmering gold. Before them stretched a dark, still lake. Neither sky nor sunset was reflected on its sullen surface. The Cyrano had been dammed and had filled all the valley. Beyond the ominous water were reared vast cliffs, their stern faces pallid in the fading light, final and impassable. No sign of gate or entrance, not a fissure or crack could Frodo see in the frowning stone. "There are the walls of Moria," said Gandalf, pointing across the water, "and there the gate stood once upon a time, the elven door at the end of the road from Hollin by which we have come. But this way is blocked. None of the company, I guess, will wish to swim this gloomy water at the end of the day. It has an unwholesome look." "We must find a way round the northern edge," said Gimli. "The first thing for the company to do is to climb up by the main path, and see where that will lead us. Even if there were no lake, we could not get our baggage pony up this stair." "But in any case we cannot take the poor beast into the mine," said Gandalf. "The road under the mountains is a dark road."
Yeah? Show me later, okay?
"The road under the mountains is a dark road, and there are places narrow and steep where he cannot tread, even if we can." "Poor old Bill," said Frodo. "I had not thought of that. And poor Sam. I wonder what he will say." "I am sorry," said Gandalf. "Poor Bill has been a useful companion, and it goes to my heart to turn him adrift now. I would have travelled lighter and brought no animal, least of all this one that Sam is fond of, if I had had my way. I feared all along that we should be obliged to take this road." The day was drawing to its end, and cold stars were glinting in the sky high above the sunset when the company, with all the speed they could, climbed up the slopes and reached the side of the lake. In breadth it looked to be no more than 2 or 3 furlongs at the widest point. How long it stretched away southward they could not see in the failing light, but its northern end was no more than 1/2 a mile from where they stood, and between the stony ridges that enclosed the valley and the water's edge there was a rim of open ground. They hurried forward, for they had still a mile or 2 to go before they could reach the point on the far shore that Gandalf was making for, and then they had still to find the doors. When they came to the northernmost corner of the lake, they found a narrow creek that barred their way. It was green and stagnant, thrust out like a slimy arm toward the enclosing hills. Gimli strode forward and undeterred, and found that the water was shallow, no more than ankle deep at the edge. Behind him they walked in file, threading their way with care, for under the weedy pools were sliding and greasy stones, and footing was treacherous. Frodo shuddered with disgust at the touch of the dark, unclean water on his feet. As Sam, the last of the company, led Bill up on the dry ground on the far side, there came a soft sound, a swish followed by a plop, as if a fish had disturbed the still surface of the water. Turning quickly, they saw ripples, black-edged with shadow, in the waning light. Great rings were widening outwards from a point far out in the lake. There was a bubbling noise, and then silence. The dusk deepened, and the last gleams of the sunset were veiled in cloud. Gandalf now pressed on at a great pace, and the others followed as quickly as they could. They reached the strip of dry land between the lake and the cliffs. It was narrow, often hardly a dozen yards across, and encumbered with fallen rock and stones, but they found a way, hugging the cliff, and keeping as far from the dark water as they might. A mile southward, along the shore, they came upon holly trees. Stumps and dead boughs were rotting in the shallows, the remains, it seemed, of old thickets or of a hedge that had once lined the road across the drowned valley. But close under the cliffs there stood, still strong and living, two tall trees, larger than any trees of holly that Frodo had ever seen or imagined. Their great roots spread from the wall to the water. Under the looming cliffs they had looked like mere bushes when seen far off from the top of the stair, but now they towered overhead, stiff, dark, and silent, throwing deep night shadows about their feet, standing like sentinel pillars at the end of the road. "Well, here we are at last," said Gandalf. "Here the elven way from Hollin ended. Hollin was the token of the people of that land, and they planted it here to mark the end of their domain. For the west door was made chiefly for their use in their traffic with the lords of Moria. Those were happier days, when there was still close friendship at times between folk of different race, even between dwarves and elves." "It was not the fault of the dwarves that friendship waned," said Gimli. "I have not heard that it was the fault of the elves," said Legolas. I have heard both," said Gandalf, "and I will not give judgment now, but I beg you too, Legolas and Gimli, at least to be friends and to help me. I need you both. The doors are shut and hidden, and the sooner we find them, the better. Night is at hand." Turning to the others, he said, "While I am searching, will you each make ready to enter the mines? For here I fear we must say farewell to our good beast of burden. You must lay aside much of the stuff that we have brought against bitter weather. You will not need it inside, nor, I hope, when we come through and journey on down into the south. Instead, each of us must take a share of what the pony carried, especially the food and the water skins." "But you can't leave poor old Bill behind in this forsaken place, Mr. Gandalf," cried Sam, angry and distressed. "I won't have it, and that's flat, after he came so far and all." "I am sorry, Sam," said the wizard, "but when the door opens, I do not think you will be able to drag your Bill inside, into the long dark of Moria. You will have to choose between Bill and your master." "He'd follow Mr. Frodo into the dragon's den if I'd let him," protested Sam. "It'd be nothing short of murder to turn him loose with all these wolves about." "It will be short of murder, I hope," said Gandalf. He laid his hand on the pony's head and spoke in a low voice. "Go with words of guard and guiding on you," he said. "You are a wise beast and have learned much in Rivendell, Make your ways to places where you can find grass, and so come in time to Elrond's house, or wherever you wish to go." Maybe he'll go back to Bill Fearney's. I doubt it. "There, Sam, he will have quite as much chance of escaping wolves and getting home as we have." Sam stood sullenly by the pony, and returned no answer. Bill, seeming to understand well what was going on, nuzzled up to him, putting his nose to Sam's ear. Sam burst into tears and fumbled with his straps, unladen all the pony's packs, and throwing them on the ground, the others sorted out the goods, making a pile of all that could be left behind, and dividing up the rest. When this was done, they turned to watch Gandalf. He appeared to have done nothing. He was standing between the two trees, gazing at the blank wall of the cliff, as if he would bore a hole into it with his eyes. Gimli was wandering about, tapping the stones here and there with his axe. Legolas was pressed against that rock, as if listening. "Well, here we are, and all ready," said Merry. "But where are the doors? I can't see any sign of them." "Dwarf doors are not made to be seen when shut," said Gimli. "They are invisible, and their own masters cannot find them or open them if their secret is forgotten." "But this door was not made to be a secret known only to dwarves," said Gandalf, coming suddenly to life and turning around. "Unless things are altogether changed, eyes that know what to look for may discover the signs." He walked forward to the wall. Right between the shadow of the trees there was a smooth space, and over this he passed his hands to and fro, muttering words under his breath. Then he stepped back. "Look," he said. "Can you see anything now?" The moon now shone upon the gray face of the rock, but they could see nothing else for a while. Then slowly on the surface where the wizard's hand had passed, faint lines appeared, like slender veins of silver running in the stone. At first they were no more than pale gossamer threads, so fine that they only twinkled fitfully where the moon caught them, but steadily they grew broader and clearer until their design could be guessed. At the top, as high as Gandalf could reach, was an arch of interlacing letters in an elvish character. Below, though the threads were in places blurred or broken, the outline could be seen of an anvil and a hammer, surmounted by a crown with 7 stars. Beneath these again were 2 trees, each bearing crescent moons. More clearly than all else, there shone forth in the middle of the door a single star with many rays. "There are the emblems of Durin!" cried Gimli. "And there is the tree of the high elves," said Legolas. "And the star of the house of Feanor," said Gandalf. "They are wrought of Ithilden, that mirrors only starlight and moonlight, and sleeps until it is touched by one who speaks words now long forgotten in Middle-earth. It is long since I heard them, and I thought deeply before I could recall them to my mind." "What does the writing say?" asked Frodo, who was trying to decipher the inscription on the arch. "I thought I knew the elf letters, but I cannot read these." "The words are in an elven tongue of the west of Middle-earth in the elder days," answered Gandalf. "But they do not say anything of importance to us. They only say, 'The doors of Durin, Lord of Moria, speak, friend, and enter.' And underneath, small and faint, is written, 'I, Narvi, made them. Celebrimbor of Holland drew these signs.'" Here is a picture of the door, by the way. So, I used a lot of ink to draw this door. So, I thought I would show it to you. And, yeah, you can see it anytime you want to. I also wanted to show you, this was a couple pages back, and I didn't get a chance to show you. So, here is this picture also. Do-do-do-do-do.
A lot of ink. What is it?
That is a picture of them.
The waterfall? Is that Bill?
Well, Bill is in it. I think this is them going around the lake. And maybe that's where the door is going to be shining. I don't know. So I didn't get a very good chance to show you that picture. We've got like about 2 pages left of today's reading. So, all right. What does it mean? Speak, friend, and enter? Asked Mary. That is plain enough. Sorry, not Gandalf. That is plain enough, said Gimli. If you're a friend, speak the password, and the doors will open, and you can enter. Yes, said Gandalf. These doors are probably governed by words. Some dwarf gates will only open at special times or for particular persons, and some have locks and keys that are still needed when all necessary times and words are known. When all necessary times and words are known. These doors have no key. In the day of Durin, they were not secret. They usually stood open, and doorwards sat here. But if they were shut, any who knew the opening word could speak it and pass in. At least so it is recorded. Is it not, Gimli? It is, said the dwarf. But what the word was is not remembered. Narvi and his craft are all his kindred have vanished from the earth. But do not you know the word, Gandalf? That sentence is, it's like Yoda speech or something. Asked Boromir in surprise. No, said the wizard. The others looked dismayed. Only Aragorn, who knew Gandalf well, remained silent and unmoved. Then what was the use in bringing us to this accursed spot? Cried Boromir, glancing back with a shudder at the dark water. You told us that you had once passed through these mines. How could that be if you did not know how to enter? The answer to your first question, Boromir, said the wizard, is that I do not know the word yet. But we shall soon see. And, he added, with a glint in his eyes under his bristling brows, you may ask what is the use of my deeds when they are proved useless. As for your other question, do you doubt my tale, or have you no wits left? I did not enter this way. I came from the east. If you wish to know, I will tell you that these doors open outwards. From the inside, you may thrust them open with your hands. From the outside, nothing will move them save the spell of command. They cannot be forced inwards. What are you going to do, then? Asked Pippin, undaunted by the wizard's bristling brows. Knock on the doors with your head, Peregrine Took, said Gandalf. But if that does not shatter them, and I am allowed a little peace from foolish questions, I will seek for the opening words. I once knew every spell in all the tongues of elves or men or orcs that was ever used for such a purpose. I can still remember 10 score of them without searching in my mind. But only a few trials, I think, will be needed, and I shall not have to call on Gimli for words of the secret dwarf tongue that they teach to none. The opening words were elvish, like the writing on the arch. That seems certain. He stepped up to the rock again and lightly touched with his staff the silver star in the middle beneath the sign of the anvil. Some more words in Elvish. Anon ed Helen edro he amen. Fenas no Gothram lasto Beth Lamen, he said in a commanding voice. The silver lines faded, but the blank gray stone did not stir. Many times he repeated these words in different order or varied them. Then he tried other spells, one after another, speaking now faster and louder, now soft and slow. Then he spoke many single words of elvish speech. Nothing happened. The cliff towered into the night. The countless stars were kindled. The wind blew cold, and the doors stood fast. I like that. The stars were kindled. That's awesome. Again Gandalf approached the wall, and lifting his arms, he spoke in tones of command and rising wrath. "Edro! Edro!" he cried, and struck the rock with his staff. "Open! Open!" he shouted, and followed it with the same command in every language that had ever been spoken in the west of Middle-earth. Then he threw his staff on the ground and sat down in silence. At that moment, from far off, the wind bore to their listening ears the howling of wolves. Bill the pony started in fear, and Sam sprang to his side and whispered softly to him. "Do not let him run away," said Boromir. "It seems that we shall need him still, if the wolves do not find us. How I hate this foul pool!" He stooped, and picking up a large stone, he cast it far into the dark water. The stone vanished with a soft slap, but the same instant there was a swish and a bubble. Great rippling rings formed on the surface out beyond where the stone had fallen, and they moved slowly toward the foot of the cliff. "Why did you do that, Boromir?" said Frodo. "I hate this place too, and I'm afraid I don't know of what, not of wolves or the dark behind the doors, but of something else. I am afraid of the pool. Don't disturb it." "I wish we could get away," said Merry. "Why doesn't Gandalf do something quick?" said Pippin. Gandalf took no notice of them. He sat with his beard bowed, either in despair or in anxious thought. The mournful howling of the wolves was heard again. The ripples on the water grew and came closer. Some were already lapping on the shore. With a suddenness that startled them all, the wizard sprang to his feet. He was laughing. "I have it!" he cried. Of course, of course! Absurdly simple, like the riddles when you see the answer." Picking up his staff, he stood before the rock and said in a clear voice, "Melon." The star shone out briefly and faded again. Then silently a great doorway was outlined through... Shh! The star shone out briefly and faded again. Then silently a great doorway was outlined, though not a crack or joint had been visible before. Slowly it divided in the middle and swung outwards inch by inch, until both doors lay back against the wall. Through the opening a shadowy stair could be seen climbing steeply up, but beyond the lower steps the darkness was deeper than the night. The company stared in wonder. "I was wrong after all," said Gandalf. "And Gimli too, Merry of all people, was on the right track. The opening word was inscribed on the archway all the time. The translation should have been, 'Say, friend, and enter.' I had only to speak the Elvish word for friend, and the doors opened. Quite simple, too simple for a learned lore master in these suspicious days. Those were happier times. Now let us go." And that is where we are going to stop for the day. We're about halfway through the chapter, A Journey in the Dark, chapter 4 of book 2 from Fellowship of the Ring. I hope that you're enjoying the story. And God bless you. Have a super night, and we will see you later. Bye.